All right, everyone, we are live. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Deconversion Stories. And today I'm chatting with the lovely Tau DeMille, who has actually told me earlier that it's okay to use her real name, which is
Tau is a
Michelle.
fake name. That is my real name. Nobody names a kid Tau. It came from a dream.
Is that how it's pronounced? I kept saying Tau,
You can say Tau. I honestly have no idea.
Tau.
It wasn't a dream, and the lady didn't even say the name in the dream. It was a name tag, so I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
It was a weird dream.
That works. Yeah, usually they are.
They all are.
So basically, what I do here is I talk to people about why they left religion and those beliefs that follow behind, and what urged them to become sort of activists within the atheist community, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't you sort of like take us back to, when you first started realizing that these beliefs you had were kind of nonsensical, and that journey from there to the point that you're at now.
Okay, so I just want to preface this by saying I'm super nervous. I wanted to make sure that I got all the chronology correct. So if I'm referring to notes at times, that's probably why, because some of the information I didn't want to miss.
Okay.
All right. So when I started thinking about how to explain the whole deconversion process, I realized that there was very little process.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of panicked. And then I thought, well, there's a story in the not questioning of validity that's equally crucial to the process itself. So even if the deconversion was very quick and literally quick and drastic, there's got to be something important to the idea that I didn't struggle at all with belief at mostly any point in my entire adult life.
Okay.
From the moment I didn't believe, I didn't struggle with that either. I didn't question it. I didn't say, oh, well, maybe you got it wrong. Maybe, there's something that you're missing. Maybe you need to study more or something. It just was done and super fast. But I had no doubt that when I came to the conclusion, that was the conclusion I came to, and it was correct. But emotionally is entirely different. You don't come to that conclusion and have zero emotional repercussions. That is not practical. But
right.
Anyway,
right.
All right. So I was raised Catholic, which means, baptism as an infant when you've got no idea whatsoever what someone has basically committed you to.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you go to mass every Sunday is what we would do every single Sunday. My brother and sisters and I, we'd go with my mother, not my dad. He said he hated the smell of incense and he wouldn't go. He was a believer, but he would not go. He said it would give him asthma and I'm not going to go.
Why didn't I ever think of that excuse?
I know. He did. He maybe Christmas, maybe Easter, never regularly at all. We used to beg my mother because we didn't want to go. It's not the most entertaining thing ever. We'll just watch somebody on TV and stay home and not actually have to get dressed and get in the car and sit and then have to kneel and then stand up and then kneel. And even as a kid, it hurts your knees. And I know that sounds weird, but I remember vividly my knees being sore at the end of
after
every mass. But anyway, so it's not the most exciting thing of that part of a kid's week. You don't really look forward to it.
For sure. No.
I did like communion though. Communion was very fun because I was always hungry.
Yeah.
45 minutes in, I was hungry. And you thought to yourself, oh, well, that's good because it's almost over as well. Communion means you've got like a good 15 minutes. You have to endure the people shaking hands and stuff and, adults looking at children and saying, oh, how cute you are. And really, you were just awkward and uncomfortable.
Any cheek pinching going on?
No, thankfully. My mother would have none of that. No. But, so you go through that communion, went through catechism, had my first communion confirmation. I admit I don't remember very much from the classes themselves. I must have gotten something because I had information. I knew Bible stories. I knew rules and laws, 10 Commandments, all of that stuff.
You mean 613 commandments, right?
and the 10 Commandments they chose to use whichever set it was. I'm pretty sure it was the second set they like to use the most, but I was not in charge of that. So whatever I did know at the time, I must have gotten from catechism. I don't see how I didn't read the Bible as a little kid. So I must have gotten it from there. I finished my workbook in class very diligently because that's what you're supposed to do. I chose my confirmation saint name, which was Saint Catherine. And I don't know why I chose her. It was very, very hasty and random. And there was no connection to the idea. It's supposed to be somebody that guides you on your journey, and maybe that's what happened. And I chose poorly. And so I got no guidance whatsoever because eventually I came here. I remember trying to give myself a pep talk at mass and say, it doesn't have to be so boring. Just listen to what they're saying. Listen to the homily, and maybe it would be interesting. And I would try really, really, really hard. But, I had a brother and 2 sisters, and we were goofy, and it was just my mother. And so, I
can only imagine.
What were we, kids? Your kids are kids, and they behave.
Church time hijinks.
Oh yeah, and we did our best, and we would get the look, and we deserved the look because you can't do that stuff in church. Come on. Anyway, so I knew all the major stuff. Original sin, Eve being the source of original sin. That was kind of weird. The ark, all of that stuff. Sacrifice of Jesus, and there was a very heavy weight with that idea. Even as a little kid, it would depress me, and I would cry in my bed alone at night, just be sad. This person being tortured, and the idea of his suffering it was depressing. Which
pointless too. If you're an omnipotent being, you shouldn't have to do that.
You don't, and you don't know that it's pointless. And then, a little kid obsessing over it was kind of sad. And it wasn't just religion. There was, when we were little, there were a considerable number of super dark times, so it contributed to that. But some, funerals and early life, and we moved around a lot and changing schools, and just, it's not easy being a kid. I don't think we give kids enough credit. It's hard. You gotta learn how to be people, and we expect so many things from them, and they're not ready. They don't know, so we just figure it out.
Yeah, I in my childhood, we didn't move very much. I mean, we had our one house, and I grew up in it until I was, I think, old enough to. I left and went to Israel for 2 years, and then I came back, and my parents had split up, so I lived with my dad. But that was the only time I ever had to really move until my adult life, when I was moving all the fucking time, it seemed. So.
Because that's how we do when you have to make it from one place to another. And they hiked my stinking rent. So now I got to move to another place, and then another place. And
yeah, they do that every year where I live right now.
Yeah.
But they only do it 3 or 4%, I think, whatever the.
It's a fixed number. That's very nice.
Yes.
My last apartment I lived in went from $1,100 a month to $1,400. That was pretty drastic. Yeah. You can't keep people when you do that. It's just not gonna work.
That's huge difference.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know why they're allowed to. I'm not in charge of so many things. Oh,
$300. That's like a fridge full of groceries right there.
I know.
Plus,
and I could eat a lot of groceries. I can get some good stuff.
I like the all-you-can-eat sushi joints. I visit them often.
Goodness.
Every time we walk in there, the guy goes, "Oh, there goes my profit margin."
It's the best. My daughter works at a sushi joint, and it's so exciting. She's always very accommodating, which is good. All right, so let's see. Something that I think didn't really help my belief when I was little it's kind of embarrassing. I used to watch Pat Robertson. The 700 Club.
Oh, yeah.
On
purpose.
Tuned into
that from time to time.
I would do it on purpose. And I was like little, 5 years old. Do you want to watch Sesame Street? No. I would like to watch Pat Robertson.
Don't watch the crazy religious man on TV, Mom.
Oh my God. I have no idea. I will never know the extent of that damage. Who could possibly? Maybe that's where it all went wrong. Not Catholicism. I can't know, because you don't really remember what it is you're watching. You just know you're obsessed with this idea of watching something. I just remember being excited. Oh, look, it's on. Hey.
Most of the time when I saw that shit come on, I'd change the channel to some cartoon if I could, right? So.
You would think, but no. I liked to watch Pat, but whatever. And now I do it to torture myself so I can tweet about something annoying that he did.
Motivation.
If he had any idea, he has no clue whatsoever.
Oh, I know.
But anyway, so I knew the basic stuff. I knew about the idea of hell, eternal punishment, that's scary. It was terribly scary. I didn't actually think I was going to go there. You know, you have that idea that you're baptized. I was trying to think of the name for it.
That's like insta-saved, isn't it?
It's theoretically, yes, it's insta-saved. You know, I don't know. I never understood the idea of doing it as an infant. You can't know.
No.
You can't know what you're getting into. But
I know, and I've seen disturbing footage of these poor infants being dumped
oh my goodness,
in the water and
the
stuff.
Baby. I know you're talking about the same exact one that I saw, where they basically drown a baby for a second and they pull it out, and the kids in the background are just staring, horrified.
Yeah,
awful.
Yeah,
it was just, it's awful, and I'm pretty sure I would have lost my shit if I saw somebody do that to my kid. But that's just me, anyway. So obviously, hell is awful and weird. The idea was scary. I didn't think I was going to go there, but you know, it didn't really make sense. And all of the stories that didn't make sense, it was uncomfortable to me. And I didn't want to think about it because it was uncomfortable. So I just didn't think about it. And if you don't think about it, then you can't question any of it.
Right.
And, you know, I know a lot of people here as kids, they're listening to Bible stories and they're going to Sunday school. And, you know, you have mentioned yourself, you were in school and they would get annoyed when you would say, but this doesn't make sense, or that doesn't make sense. I never did. I didn't question it at all. It was uncomfortable. I just wouldn't think about it. And even yesterday, I realized why. I didn't understand until I was obsessing about coming on your show, because I don't know how to do anything without overthinking, because that's just how I do things. And preparing this, I just realized it was discomfort that I was feeling. And that's why I didn't think of things. You know, I was trying to figure out, why is it you didn't question? It was uncomfortable. We don't want to think about something that is harmful to somebody else, or that might make us afraid. And so I wouldn't even writing down my notes and thinking about what I was going to say today. I procrastinated because although I wanted to, I was uncomfortable even with the idea of coming on here and telling anyone who is willing to listen. Oh my goodness, how kind of you all to be here to listen. Oh.
You know, 17 of them so far.
What?
Yeah.
Hi, 17 people. I can't see the chat, and I know sometimes
if you look up into the right corner, you'll see live comments, and you click on that, and you'll be able to see
them. I have my secret cheat sheet there. So I'm just going to have to be surprised at all the comments later when I read them. Anyway, so as a kid, we changed schools a lot, and I think it's a memorable sort of discomfort, because, you know, you go to a new school and you got to stand up in front of the class and talk about yourself and say your name, and it reminded me of the same feeling. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to consider it. I you know, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, it's really just uncomfortable. So I didn't want to think about it anymore. Even right now, it's uncomfortable. Some of it is uncomfortable. Still, it's uncomfortable.
Like, to talk about, or do you feel
to talk about, to think about believing the things that I believed in, and not because, you know, oh, what an idiot. I understand why people believe and forever to the day they die. I get it. I don't really question why, you know. So I know a lot of people on Twitter, they'll get really annoyed and stressed out, and oh, how stupid could people be? And it's not really that. It's, you know, feelings. You feel this thing is real, and you don't question. You're told when you're this big, and when you're that big, there's, you know, this is just what's real. You just don't. I avoid uncomfortable feelings, not like denial, just you just don't think about it.
Yeah, you don't want to be in that position, I guess. You just don't want to feel that way.
No. And all the darker stories that I did come across, they were just as uncomfortable. So I didn't even question the existence of God when those stories would, you know, come up, and I would have to wrestle with the idea that someone drowned millions of people. I didn't say to myself, well, you know, maybe he's not real. I just said, oh, that's terrible to do.
What a dick.
That's a horrible thing. That's just a horrible idea. Why would he do that? It was not like, did he, because he is or is not. It was just, why would he do that? And you don't understand. So
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
we didn't dissect it at home. It's not like we, would discuss the Bible at home. And, it was
Like
just,
never?
it just was. No. You would, thank God would be a phrase you would use. You would, you pray to God. And if you were upset, we were encouraged to pray because it was comforting. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
Celebrate Christmas, it was Jesus's birthday, Easter for obvious reasons. But there is also kind of superiority to Catholicism. There are some things that are sort of progressive.
Most popular denominations. So
yeah. Evolution was a big one. So, it's not like we had to wrestle with the idea in science class that, well, science says this is real, because Catholicism was like, sure.
They eventually kind of
eventually.
it anyways, right?
Eventually. But, it was not something that you had to say to yourself, well, maybe if evolution wasn't real, or then I have to question my faith. It was just, it's real. And,
here's one for you.
Mysterious ways. How dare.
Oh yeah. That's what this is all about.
Oh, sworn.
That's awesome.
He's the best. I love him to pieces. He sent me like 1 billion motivational videos right before this, because I'm a very unreliable, not stressful. I'm totally cool.
Were they Stuart Smalley ones? Like, you're good enough?
That would have been a good one. Oh,
and gosh darn it, people like you.
They do like me. It's so true. At least maybe 17. I don't know the count.
It's 21.
I don't know. Holy crap, there's more.
My stream is now old enough to drink in the US.
Whee! That's exciting. So no, I didn't question existence. And if anything I did question, it was morality. It was not the actual existence of God. So, whether or not something in the Bible had a valid lesson or purpose attached to it, I would feel guilty about questioning it, because, Catholicism trains you to believe that you are inherently sinful.
Yep.
And your thoughts, they must be also, and that you have something within you that you have to fight off. And so you would feel guilt if you would think of something that would be negative against, the church or whatever.
Right. Sure.
The devil was uncomfortable. What?
It's also 420, guys. So spark him if you got him. Just saying.
That's for the after party.
Right. Yeah. We can make an exception.
I mean, what are you talking about? I don't know what that reference is to at all.
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Some salad, maybe. It's the kind of salad you smoke rather than eat.
Salad.
But,
it is green.
Exactly. It is green. Yes, it does grow like all the other stuff that we eat that's salad related, I guess.
True. So, I didn't question stuff up. If something would crop up, it was like a shallow concern that I would have. And it's not like I was emotionally prepared to let go of something that I was comfortable with. The idea of God was actually comforting. There was somebody there. Or even the sacrifice of Jesus was weird, because you would think to yourself, oh, that horrible thing happened for me. Wow. And
I'd be horrified. Like, dude, what are you doing?
And you feel guilt for it. Like, you did all of that for me, but why? And so
you weren't even around then. He didn't do it for you.
You don't know that at 5.
Well, that's true.
No idea at 5.
Hell, I didn't even know how to tie my fucking shoes at 5. So yeah, I get it.
My brother taught me to tie my shoes. I remember vividly. I don't know if I was 5 though.
I think it's around there that you sort of learn. But yeah, I think my mom showed me how. You do the whole loop and the rabbit going through the hole and all that shit,
It's hard to teach someone to tie a shoe.
It is
actually hard to teach. I just taught my son a couple months ago, and it is hard. And you don't realize it because you do it without thinking. And then you're trying to give a little kid instructions and you're like, how do I word this in a way I understand to hold one thing with multiple fingers? And he got it eventually.
I'm sure.
He compensated with his intelligence despite my lack of explaining skills.
Mom, just give me some fucking slip-ons.
He's got them. Tons of that. That's a problem too. Kids are Velcro for ease of
yeah.
putting it on and taking it off. You know, when you will go to church, the stories that tell you in church, they're palatable. They're not, you know, the darker stories. Let's discuss, you know, in front of all the children, Abraham and Isaac. They weren't those stories. They were very easy to swallow stories. And I noticed this at any church service I would go to. It was not, you know, Catholicism. Every denomination. I've gone to several different sorts of church services.
Mm-hmm.
I would chalk it up to context, which is now officially my least favorite word ever.
Overused.
Overused and really just an excuse.
And I love it when they tell us we're taking things out of context too. I'm like, no.
It's very annoying.
It's all subjective. That's why there's over 30,000 different fucking denominations, because it's all subjective.
Oh, that's my favorite one to use. If it was all right, then why are there so many? But you know,
hell. I mean, if he was real, everyone on the planet would know it, not just some small group of fucking goat herders in the Middle East. Everyone would know it. There'd be one book, and anyone who picked it up would be able to read it in whatever language they spoke, because that's what an omnipotent being could do.
Right. It could be the same information. It could be at least relatively similar, you know, information, which sometimes it happens. You've got, you know, one culture believes this thing and then another culture believes another thing. And it's all very there because they're all kind of around each other. But when you get to that next culture, they're not given credit to the previous culture. So it's a whole different religion. And really, it's
That's right.
Not, context. It bothers me. The one thing as a kid that would always come back, and I couldn't, you know, push it down, and that was homosexuality. That was the most troublesome thing to me because I have several gay family members, and I love them.
I have a couple as well.
So much, and I couldn't get past that one. I couldn't get past the idea that you would want me to reject someone that I love and for who they are, and I don't get it, and I never got it, and it's not, you can't get it. There's no logical way to explain it, and so that one was always uncomfortable. But I couldn't ignore that one because I would continually be reminded, because you visit gay family members and you say to yourself, but it's not supposed to be the thing. It's supposed to be a sin, and yet it didn't make any sense. I don't think I can blame my lack of critical thinking entirely on religion. I'm sure other exposures in life made me, you know, all those delightfully uncomfortable situations that I avoided like the plague. You don't think critically when you're uncomfortable. You just don't want to think about
that's
it.
true too, or it can be anyways.
And I was a picker and chooser, like so many. You know, I believed what I wanted to believe because it was more comfortable for me to believe it. And I get it. I know why. I adopted what my inner morality dictated that I should adopt. You know, I held on to the softer teachings, the ones that were
the love ones.
Yes, and it makes sense and it feels good. And I'm, you know, if you're going to do it, I'd rather do it that way. And, you know, don't tell people about stoning children. And I'm like,
I know. Nobody wants to hear
learn
about
that until way later.
Smashing them against rocks and stuff. Like, come on.
Oh my goodness, it's awful. It's awful.
Kill everyone, including their cattle. What did the fucking cattle do?
Poor animals. They have been so mistreated. There's no voice for them except for a snake that is vilified. It's the only
apparently has vocal cords.
Oh.
Or in a donkey that can talk too, apparently.
Oh, that's right. Thinking donkey. I always forget about that.
What an ass.
Wah, wah, wah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would say to something like that too. That's awesome.
It's true, but it's a good one, and you have to say it.
Yeah.
You know, there was an idea that in order to try to understand why certain things didn't make sense, I would hold on to some sort of a camaraderie that I had with God, you know, in reference to Jesus specifically. So if we're talking about sacrifice and torture, and which didn't make sense at all, the only way my brain would make sense of it is I would say to myself, well, you know, maybe it had more to do with God's suffering, and we all suffer. And so, you know, he's willing to suffer with us. It never made sense. It never actually came to a conclusion in my head that that was the real reason. It was just something that I would circulate for a short period of time and then let it go because it was uncomfortable and it didn't really make sense. And so I didn't want to tell myself I was wrong. I don't like to be wrong.
Nobody likes to be wrong. But, I always say the best thing about being proven wrong is you're no longer wrong.
True.
But my friend Don had a question. He wanted to know what you thought about how women were treated in the Bible, or how they were.
Awful, terrible, awful, terrible, terrible. It's shocking how we don't see it because we don't pay attention to what the actual meaning is. As a kid, when you find out that Eve is responsible for all the horrible stuff that we have to go through, as a young girl, you feel it like, oh, a girl did that. I vividly remember that's terrible that happened, and I'm a girl, and there's a correlation. You do, just because we actually correlate to try to identify with each other, and you do. And thinking of it now is terrible. Rape and buying and selling and everything I learned after and I didn't know most of it. I didn't learn all I know about slavery and selling your daughters and having to marry, your
50 shekels.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, if you're raped, you just have to give her dad 50 shekels, and then of course you have to marry her, of course. But
they don't tell you
not allowed to divorce either.
Sunday school, they don't tell you that in Sunday school.
Oh, of course not. That would traumatize the fuck out of children.
It would. I would have been traumatized.
They wait till later to traumatize them.
I probably would have questioned sooner had I known all of those things in advance. And I've said to people, what do you tell your kid that you believe? If you can't tell them certain things, then they can't make an informed decision about that thing.
Right.
If you have to omit stuff, then you can't say for sure you believe this thing because you're not given the information to factor. So just don't until you feel comfortable that they are emotionally and mature and prepared to hear it. And I would read the Bible throughout childhood. I would read it. I read it as a teenager. I read it as an adult, but I didn't really dissect it. It was a story. I would read it as a story, and I believed it was true, but I didn't really dig and, realize that this thing was not the same in this book as it says it's in this book, and all the Gospels and
the contradictions and stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, they're so similar.
Excuse me.
Oh my goodness, it must be true. But no, it's, that I didn't get it because you don't read it like that. You're just reading it like someone is telling you a story. Even I was,
that's the way they're written, though, too, I believe, because it was oral tradition up until it was written down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think I was 35 or 6, and my brother called me up, and he was doubting, and he was like, "But why? I don't think I believe that it's real." And even then, I didn't question it. I was trying to convince him, but it's embarrassing, the ridiculous coincidence situation. I try to tell him this is a coincidence. It must be real, because why else would this thing happen except for, to do with some sort of walker and some random person needing one, and I was getting rid of one. No, it's just lots of people have kids and they're all over the place, and you happen to have a walker. You think whatever you think, and you believe what you believe, and that it must be, because it's way easier to think that you're not in control of some things, because then when things go wrong, you can't blame you. It's,
yes, it's like a free absolving of any responsibility.
Yes, which I also
get out of jail free card
and bad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
Not healthy. And I did a lot of not doing stuff in my adult life, mostly because I was just waiting for stuff to happen, because I was praying and it didn't happen. There must be a reason why. And, so even then he's asking me questions, and I tried to give him some really poor reason why, and he wasn't buying it. And he didn't feel, I don't think he felt, not that I wasn't listening to him. He just wasn't getting any information from me. So he just kind of let it go, which is probably wise. And I know atheists are often accused, you must have had something horrible happen to you.
Yes, I hear that quite often.
Thing, a death, an injury,
now you hate God.
Job loss, and you hate God, and that's why you're not a believer anymore. What happened to you? Tell me so that I can make you feel better, and then you can come back to the faith. It didn't work that way. I'd had none of that. I'd had tragedy, because everyone does, but every time something awful would happen, I would seek God. I would pray, and it was comforting during tragedy. So I didn't question at that time. It was comfort. There was a comfort in the idea, the illusion that someone was listening to you. And we just
Did you feel he ever answered any of your prayers? Or?
Probably. I
found a way to make it work.
It was not specific. None of it was specific. Even if I prayed that if I felt better, I would attribute it to that. You helped me feel better about this horrible thing that happened.
Okay.
And so that must have been an idea in my head that was proof. I felt better when really it was an illusion in my head.
Yeah.
Right. Dang it. If I had known that, think of all the things I could have accomplished with my mental powers.
Well, I still think people I've often heard other atheists that are, still relatively new out of belief, but they'll say that they still occasionally will pray, but it's more like talking to themselves about a problem that they have ultimately take care of themselves, but they just like that whole ritualistic thing of it, like a meditative kind of thing. Yeah. That kind of thing. Right. So I never slight people for doing something like that because, hey, whatever works for you. Right.
Right. And if you feel better at the end of it, I don't care as long as, it didn't come at the expense of somebody else. You do whatever.
Right.
To you.
And you harm none, do as you will.
Right. It was an idea and it felt comforting. And so I believed that God was real because if I prayed, I would feel better. And people are in their lives, and so many people are stresses and going through their own little miseries. And so everybody's just trying to live, and people are drowning all around you. So the idea that there was something always there that could hear you and could comfort you was in itself wonderful. But it wasn't real. And the idea in my head now that it could be me is even more empowering, because then I am in charge of the gravity of it, which I didn't know then. But it's nice to know now. But there was something listening. If I had a nightmare, I would put a Bible under my pillow, because it would, sometimes you have a nightmare. Yeah. If you ever have a nightmare and then you go back to sleep and that stupid nightmare comes back, it would always come back. But if I got up and I put a Bible under my pillow, it wouldn't come back. And I thought for sure that it was because it was a Bible and it was
like
working.
A psychosomatic response to me.
Exactly. You don't know. I don't actually have nightmares, ironically, anymore.
No.
Not in such a long time that I can remember it vividly, with the exception of one nightmare. But that's because I started a new job and I have a zombie problem, so I had a nightmare about I was in some sort of warehouse, and it was a medical records job, and so there were, I was like in this huge warehouse where there were stacks and stacks of colored files, and I had to climb to get away from zombies. But that was like 8 years ago, and I was still a believer then, and my Bible was very helpful.
Away, zombies.
Yes. I was pretty good at it in my dreams. But anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought it was working. I thought that was a comfort, but it wasn't. And I was already kind of attuned to the idea of natural consequences, because it fit right in with the whole free will thing. If something didn't go right when you prayed for it, then it's because I'm not in control of things, and there must be a plan and a reason why. So of course it didn't work out the way that I wanted. So you can always give God credit for free will and for also not answering your prayer.
Well, if you want, I guess.
if you want to not think about stuff. Yes, that's exactly what you do. I did not dissect it. I left home at 19 years old, married a very much older person who happened to be a missionary kid. And it was, he was very clear, obvious result of what could be, a very dangerous form of religious upbringing. But that's, his life and his story. But anyway, it didn't work out well. I absolutely.
The age gap was too big?
12 years.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't have to be big if you're 40. It is when you're 18. 18 and I'm sorry. 14 years. Crap, I can't do math. It's 14
so he was 32?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the biggest gap for me, of course, it was a little later in life, but I think I was 32 and she was 24. So 8 years, something like that.
24 is adulty.
Yeah. Adult-esque. on the precipice, we'll say.
Yeah, 24 is okay. 32, you still feel like you're in your 20s. I
Yeah, that's
technically
true.
feel like I'm in my 20s. I just don't,
Oh, I know.
don't I'm in
That's
my
why
20s.
I like my shirt that says I'm not like most teens. I'm in my 50s.
Can I
Early
have one of
50s
those?
people. Let's not get carried away.
That's right. Be honest about it.
Yeah.
So obviously getting married that young was a very bad idea. I got pregnant, had my first kid at 20. So I was a kid and she was a kid, and that's too young to have a kid. I was very confident that I already knew everything I had to know about parenting. And running
Right.
away from home is obviously not a good sign that you know what you're doing about things. So
Yeah, no.
it's not a healthy decision at all. And it didn't obviously turn out well. A young mother making unhealthy decisions, there was bound to be tons of mistakes, and there were. And I didn't try to become a better parent either. I thought I knew. You love your kid and you think that's plenty. That's what you need to do. And of course I
raise
did.
kids on love alone.
Oh, no, you cannot. And of course I love her deeply. She's the most wonderful person to this very day. And she's working right now, and she called me earlier to give me emotional support because she's wonderful.
Aw.
So, oh yes, I'm so glad.
She knew you were coming on and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yes, she knows all sorts of stuff now. We have a way better relationship than we did. But, predictably, the marriage did not work out well. And it was kind of like a sort of prison for a few years. And then, I was an unhappy and very angry mother because I didn't, you have your emotional problems. And,
Sure.
I would show her all the affection that I could possibly show her with what I had available. But ultimately, I was too young and too angry and sad. And I had no idea what to do with all those feelings of emptiness and fear. And I eventually divorced my ex, and she was 8 years old at the time. But I continued to struggle emotionally. And I did remarry a lovely person, which is great. And she loves him, and he's wonderful.
But things are still good and stuff?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, I can be here because he's currently with the little person and bathing him and putting him to bed. And usually I'm doing that. That's why I always miss your live things, and I watch them later. Because,
what a good man you got there.
Oh, yeah. He's good. And they were just doing origami together, which is insane to me. I cannot.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. Like I'll tweet some every once in a while, and then I realize I'm not giving him any credit whatsoever. People might think it's me doing it.
Yeah.
Not me, guys. Sorry.
I can't even make a paper fucking airplane these days.
I can make a frog. I can make a frog, and I can make a ninja star. And I don't enjoy making either one. I don't.
Yeah, but at least you can.
I can physically do it. I don't have any desire to spend that time.
I'd love to be able to make a throwing star.
There'd be a lot of
injured people around, but
tons of YouTube videos. If you're dying to, you could totally learn. Do you know who taught me how to do it? The 6-year-old. He taught me how to do a ninja star.
Awesome.
He can do it. You can do it. You're good.
Here's a shuriken, Ma.
Yeah. Yes. All different sizes. Doesn't matter.
I had real ones.
You had real ones. Oh,
yeah, real ones. We used to be able to. You can't buy them in Canada, so we have to go down to Bellingham in Washington
and bring them back with you.
Yeah. We'd sneak them in. Of course. Just put them in your pocket. They're tiny, and then I can see it. Of course, you'd sit down funny, and it'd be like, "Ow!" Because they're sharp.
You ruined some pants that way, I'm sure.
Yeah, pants are replaceable.
Ninja stars are not.
No.
Not easily.
If you put them in your front pocket, don't put them in your front pocket. Bad idea. You only need to get circumcised once, people.
Yeah. That would be terrible.
Yeah, I stabbed myself in the leg a few times, I think. So, but that's all right. Awful. Yeah, it's minor. A little bit of blood. Put a Band-Aid on it. It's all good.
Good for you. It's an upside. So, she turned 12 and she started taking violin lessons. and her instructor told me about a book. And it was a parenting book. And it was a book that would help me learn to cope with what I did not know.
Violin lessons? Oh.
Yes, no, cope with paying for violin lessons, which was very important. But he told me about this parenting book because he used it as an instructor, because he worked with a lot of kids. And so it helped him work through challenges that he would have with instructing kids, because kids are combative with anybody, or the resistant, or, it just helps you learn how to talk to people and to help them open up and be able to do things because they want to.
Sure.
The idea that we could learn to relate to each other and learn how to love her properly, which I was not doing. I didn't know I was not doing this, of course. So I used this book. It was a tool, and this tool was amazing. Unfortunately, I ignored this book for like 3 years. I didn't read it. I should have read it at 12, because I would be way beyond where I'm at today. But it took me 3 years to start reading it. But he would mention it a few times, and he wasn't wrong. I should have read it when he told me, but I finally started it. I gave birth to my son at 35. It was right around when I started it. So it was not that long ago. It's kind of like an instruction manual, which is sort of cool, like a secret decoder ring for people, which is nice. But it's a way to distance yourself. Ironically, you can have more compassion for people by distancing yourself, because you don't take on the whatever personal emotional outburst they happen to have, because you realize it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with that person. And I didn't know that until I read the book. And a lot of people do. I know a ton of people come to these conclusions without having to read a book, which I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Whatever. However you get to it, it doesn't really matter. So anyway, I read this book, and it wasn't really dismissive of religion. The author is a Christian, and he would even bring up a segment about how to incorporate your faith with the tools that you were learning. So
fuck that boy.
Listen, if he still came up with this idea, I'm totally okay with it, because if it wasn't for that, I would not be here today. I know it sounds strange, but literally it was a book. It just wasn't the Bible that brought me here. Bizarre. It was a totally different book. But it had one idea in this book, and this idea, was the idea of accomplishing how to love well, and it was unconditional love. And it's logical. Of course, you're supposed to unconditionally love people, right? We all know it in theory, but doing it is not the same. Accepting people regardless of what they say, regardless of what they do, good choices, bad choices, and again,
I think for most cases, I think unconditional love is really just a nice ideal. I don't know if people are actually capable of that.
Oh, it's almost impossible. But
Right.
you've got to know that there's a way to achieve the best possible path to it.
Yeah, just get as close
How
to
do
that
I
as you
work
possibly
on
can. Yeah.
Right. A way for me to work on it. And this was the way. And we're all very accustomed to conditional loving. You treated well when, we behave well, and we're treated negatively when we don't. And, so we learned over years of practice and training, we compensate for our lack of unconditional love as, usually as children. And you fill it with power, and how do you get that power? You belittle people, or you're aggressive, or you victimize yourself. They're all forms of power, and it doesn't feel as good as feeling unconditionally loved, but it feels better than nothing, because
that's right.
Is somewhat fulfilling, just not sustainable fulfilling. And the people fostering this, they're not trying to raise their children with conditional love. We just don't know any better, and it goes back and back. One parent is doing it to to their kids, and that happened because their parent did it to them, and then their parent. It's a horrible backwards cycle. So it's not anyone's fault necessarily. It's just we don't know better. And, we develop those tools to cope in those moments when we're conditionally loved as children. We practice them, and then they become us, and we utilize them as adults. And if we keep practicing them, it's going to be how we respond to these situations, even if they're different.
Absolutely.
And they're not sustaining. So you have to keep doing it. You have to keep, attacking people verbally, because I need more of that power, but it doesn't fulfill me. So I have to keep doing it. Or if I'm a person who victimizes myself.
Right. Like,
Twitter is horrible for this. Oh my goodness.
oh yeah, you don't have to tell me. You've been involved in a few of the things that I've had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. It is special, is what I'm going to say.
I think that's the first time I ever saw anything from you was during one of these exchanges I had. You kind of just popped in. I was like, I like this person.
Oh, that was a while ago too.
Yeah.
Was, what were we talking about? Oh, there's somebody, I can't remember.
Oh, it always has to do with
either
morality, I think, or something.
Yeah, I don't think she's a real person. I think she's like Ken Ham in disguise. She's dressed as whoever she said she was. You know, too much creationist. It was a creationist thing, is what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, trying to use mitochondrial Eve as proof. Real.
It's weird every time I hear that word, which I know it's a real thing, mitochondrial, but it makes me think of Star Wars, midichlorians. Right? So I don't know why, but it always makes me go there.
It's all right. So anyway, you use these coping skills, and that is your hell. You live it and you cycle through it. And so anyway, I discovered this book, and I finally read this book, and it was way overdue. And my poor daughter, she had to wait 15 years for me to start reading it and putting a lot of the stuff into practice. And it took me 2 or 3 years to finish this book because it was so filled with self-loathing and guilt. And I could only cope with, my disappointment in myself and sadness for my daughter and what she had to endure. And, I could only cope with it in very small doses. So it took me a while to finish it, which is something religion does very well. Teaches you how to self-loathe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Well. I was the one responsible. I contributed to her sadness and her frustration. And I know I was not the only one, because she had, her father who has his own problems. People work on them, but you have to know their problems in order to work on them.
Sure.
Every single person you encounter has these issues. So, she had to battle other people. But the idea that started me on this whole path, and I'm getting there. I'm so sorry. I have very long, winding roads worth of.
That's okay. They want to know what the name of the book is, though.
Real Love and Parenting by Greg Bear. I highly recommend it. And there's different, Real Love and Parenting. There's one for PTSD. There's one, which I haven't read the PTSD one, but there's a marriage one. I haven't read the dating one because I haven't had to date in my adult life, which is wonderful. I'm so fortunate.
I hate you right now.
I actually feel super fortunate for not having to. Just that I know
you are.
It's got to be just a bear, but.
Well, fuck! You found a gem. Why would you go mining anymore?
I was sitting on my garbage can. I'm not joking. It was like outside of an apartment, and it was a bench. And you sit on the bench, but the bench was a garbage can because they would come and they'd pick up your garbage. And so, there's a garbage can, and, his cousin lived, across the way. So I didn't have to leave my house. Ugh, people are going to hate me. I'm sorry.
You said, oh, there's one.
I'm sorry. Pretty much.
He looks good. Grab him.
Pretty much. So anyway, the idea that this book highlighted for me, that brought me to atheism was a single feeling that I was expressing repeatedly, and that was anger. I was angry at people, and I would always express anger at my daughter. Or I expressed disappointment when she wouldn't do what I thought she should do, or I would yell at her when her grades were not up to my very unrealistic expectations, or her room was a mess. Or, I don't believe that religion has to create these responses in people, by the way. It's super important. I know religious parents who are wonderful and loving parents, and they are excellent listeners, and they don't have the mechanisms that they needed, like some other people do. Like I cultivated whatever I did for a reason, and some other people don't have to cultivate them because they're, I don't know. Life is different for everybody, but
absolutely it is.
So not necessarily does this have to come from being raised in a religious home, but
sure.
A lot of times I think you adopt a very modern morality despite what your religion tells you. And so you adopt that and you live with it. And so I think that's why a lot of people don't treat their children like that, because, this is how we do things now. And, you embrace that context of having to stone your children when they're disobedient. And you say, well, I'm not going to do that, obviously, because we live in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Or
I've got a wooden spoon.
or a belt.
Or a belt, yeah, which I had both.
Or switch. I hate that word. A switch.
A switch? Go get something to hit me with. Here's a feather.
That in itself, oh my goodness, is awful. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, it rarely happened, but there was one time when I think I came home past my curfew and he just lost his shit. And my sister and my mom literally thought I was a goner. That's how much he was pounding on me. Yeah. They were afraid for my life.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. But you're here now, and so everything's okay.
Well, shit. My dad passed away in 2010. So that was really the only harsh negative thing I ever had with him. Everything else I remember was good stuff, but
Isn't that funny? You grow up and you're like, oh my goodness, everything was so horrible. But I think only the hysterical, fun, wonderful stuff about my dad now.
Yeah.
He was hysterical and awesome and goofy. And if I had known everything I know now, I would have been a totally different person.
Sure.
I think
he tried to teach me, how to be, a decent person. I mean, table manners, stuff like that. If I had my elbow on the table, I get a fork. Get that off the table.
Right.
Oh, geez, but not hard enough
learned.
To. Yeah, but and that kind of shit I didn't really have issues with at that time. I just like, yeah, fuck you, douche, that kind of thing, right? But I wouldn't say it out loud, or that was it. The bell came off.
But you were not happy when that happened.
Well, of course not. Of course not. But you learn, you live, you learn. You move forward. I'm not going to harbor that shit. I'm not going to be angry at him for all that stuff, because I knew there was underlying shit that made him react that way. That doesn't.
And that's exactly the point. Everybody behaving horribly is for a reason, and it most likely has nothing to do with you.
That's right. But I'm not going to harbor any hate because of that. I'm not excusing what he did. I'm not saying that validates it somehow, but
But you don't know better. You can't attack somebody for not knowing better. And they thought they were doing something for a good reason. He I'm sure thought that he was helping you learn a thing, even if it was very awful feeling.
Yeah, it was brutal at the time. That's for sure. Oh well.
So anyway, eventually, once I read this book, learning what I learned about how to understand why people do what they do, religion finally factored in. I had digested the book for a few years. I had already been reading a lot of the Bible throughout my entire adult life, so I knew a lot of the stories. But for whatever reason, I hit 39 years old, and then everything that conflicted, all conflicting scriptures, they popped into my head, and I allowed myself to think about them and dissect them. It was like an experiment. There were no feelings attached to it. It was just thoughts. And I was sitting here at my desk, and a phrase popped into my head, and it was God is love. And it was completely in direct conflict with all the examples from the Bible that I knew. Forced compliance, intimidation, violence, subjugation, slavery, pick a thing. We all know the things. If you deviate from the required loyalist and fear-mongering form of moral education, you were going to get punished. God was going to be angry, and that's a key word. Even though you were behaving exactly as the person he supposedly made you out to be. You were who he made. And he doesn't like you for who you are, so he's going to drown you or destroy you or torture you or, every last one of us who behaves awfully. That's,
Yeah, but he would have known ahead of time, huh?
You'd think.
All-knowing, isn't he?
It doesn't make sense.
I know, but he went ahead with it all anyways. Sounds like a setup.
Literally.
He's a mob boss or something.
That's what it seems like. That's what it feels like a really bad club that you don't actually want to be a member of anymore. Like, I don't want to have to do those, kind of initiations. And I knew what unconditional love was. Finally, I knew anger was not that. I knew that jealousy was not unconditional love. I knew that requiring acts of loyalty from people are not unconditional love. And I had learned that from this book, that all of these responses that are jealousy or anger or attacking people in general, they were all
those things
learned.
that God is.
They're learned responses. They're
Of course, yeah.
They're ways that people, learn to cope with things. They're very human ways that people learn to cope with things.
Indeed.
And even the whole Jesus's love idea, that made no sense in my head either, because Jesus is the one who really told us how awful hell was going to be. And the idea of hell is just terrible, that you would say that someone who is sinful and maybe lies in their life deserves to be tortured for it doesn't make sense.
Eternity, right?
Eternal
torture,
lying. And I know that
crime.
Right. If a kid lies, there's a reason why that kid is lying. Why are you trying to avoid getting in trouble? Because your parents are going to yell at you and you don't want to feel unloved by your parents. Or what if your parents hit you? You don't want to, of course the kid is going to lie. That doesn't make them inherently sinful, which is its own horrible idea. But
it's also learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I had this hyperlapsed thought process in my head. And I'm telling you, this whole deconversion process happened in minutes at the most. And I'm thinking about the whole
one of the lucky ones
concept, and Corinthians was the biggest one. All these things, you're all these things, but you can't be all these things, because all of these things are things that people do. They're not things that someone who would be an omnipotent, all-knowing,
omniscient, omnipresent
you can't do it. And then then from God is love, my brain said God is not love, because God cannot be love. God keeps behaving like a human would behave.
Yep. A hateful human, actually.
Right. You could not be the source of the creation of love, because every reaction that you had to things in the Bible as a God is something that someone would do as a human. It was illogical to insist that he did love us, and that contradiction was too confusing. They were all overreactions. They were all very human symptoms.
Yes, they were
responsive.
You kind of tell that the books were written by humans, right?
Oh, well, that's exactly what it was. That was
their main character acted like one.
All of those responses were human things. It wasn't a deity, because a deity could not possibly.
If he's all these things,
that just tells me he had horrible parents who made him feel these horrible things.
Well, if he was all these things that he allegedly was, like omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, would he even fucking care about us? Like, I'm sorry, like, would we even register to a being like that? Probably not. It'd be like us trying to be good parents to fucking bacteria that live on our skin, right? Like, we can't see them.
Bacteria. You got to be good to your bacteria in your gut, Neil.
Oh, I get them drunk every day. What are you talking about?
That's well fermented stuff. You've got some good bacteria in there.
And I like yogurt, so there you go.
Because it's yummy.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, the deconversion was super clean, like really fast. I believed, and then I didn't. It was that fast.
What was the one thing that kind of put you over that hump?
The God is love thing. That's it. It didn't make sense. It was a human thing. The response, my understanding of unconditional love was simply that it was a human response. If you're going to be angry at people, that's a way a coping human would react. If you're going to want to be violent to people, that's a thing that a coping human would do.
Yep.
And it didn't make sense. It just was, and it was not like, but, I didn't try to convince myself, I didn't try to say to myself, well, maybe it's because I couldn't even come up with an argument. There wasn't one. There was none. It didn't make sense. This is what people do. So this had to be made by people. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it was made by people, just it cut it off, that it's not real. None of this is real. None of them are real. And of course, I learned about all sorts of horrible stuff after that, because then you read it differently. You're not reading it to be consoled. You're reading it to learn.
Richard.
I use
Richard's
all
good
that
people.
for my flora and fauna.
He's a good
That's
god to
called-
his bacteria.
That's called self-love. And
That's
it's very
awesome, Richard. Actually,
That's
you
right.
reminded me of something that I used to say. I kind of switched around. There's an old expression, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Well, I kind of turned it around. I'm like, to err is divine and to forgive is human.
It's so true. It's funny, but it's real. It's really real. Because we learn how to do it. And this thing that you say is real. It can't possibly, because it just wants to kill us all the time. Terrible, horrible, violent ways.
And he did. Oh, for like 8 of them.
It's insane.
The world came into being, population-wise, by incest. Twice, people. Get that through your head. Twice.
I know.
We're all inbred Jeds.
It's true.
Not really. But anyway.
But I know it seems like a really long setup to it without a whole lot of doubt in between. But I think it's important to remember that there are not logical reasons for believing or not believing. It's just you
grow up in it.
Indoctrination being what it is. It's huge, and there are comforts to it. And people who believe, they feel better for believing. And so,
well, they've convinced themselves that that's the case.
Not even necessarily convinced themselves. They were convinced by someone, and so they just didn't. You just don't think about it. So I once I came to the conclusion, I didn't try to even change my thought. I didn't try to convince myself of anything else. This is what it is. I didn't say, well, I'm going to miss this or I'm going to miss that. And there have been, emotional implications. Death has been one of the hardest ones. I think you have to do things differently. You have to think about death differently.
Yes. Because
that in itself is a huge comforting thing. I thought the people that have died in my life, I was going to get to see them again. And you don't, it doesn't work that way. And so you have to readdress a lot of that stuff, which is okay, but you have to do it. The decision itself was clean, like an umbilical cord, just cut it, it was done. And I couldn't convince myself. I didn't even want to convince myself that I was wrong.
This is a great point right here.
Enough self-doubt. It's true. It's very true.
Yep. And
I lived it for decades, and a lot of people do. Yep. And I don't necessarily, I'm not comforted by the idea, on Twitter, tons of people attack people for their belief, and it's not the way to get people to hear you. No. And it's not always the logical that's going to convince people. It wasn't a logical argument that convinced me. It was my own willingness to think about it. And sometimes all it takes is someone to be willing, and you can't force people to be willing.
No. You can't force people to do anything in general.
So that's it. Official. I'm done.
Done, finished, kaput. Well, that's good, because we have a fairly large community. And as I found, once I fell into this community, quite by accident, to be honest. I mean, I have 2 Twitter accounts. One is directly linked to my Facebook, which is my other one, which I used to do all my gaming stuff. And then I decided, you know what, I'm going to start up one that's based in my atheistic stuff. So I started up 604 Atheist. And by the way, the 604...
Oh, that's right, because you do Yu-Gi-Oh, don't you?
That's right, yeah.
My nephew used to do that. It reminds me so much.
It's a lot of fun.
It was fun. But I wish I had gotten involved with him, because we would have had tons of good times if I had done it. And I would totally still be doing it today if I had gotten involved, I'm sure. It's precisely the kind of obsessive thing I'd love to do.
I have lots of fucking cards over there. As you can see, there's fucking tins upon tins upon tins upon tins of shit. So I can always teach you.
I am a willing learner. I only have like 100 books on my short list that I have to learn and read. That's the short list. It's getting longer.
I've got a stack right here that I'm going through, including Andrew Sedell's recent one.
Oh, that's on my short list. That's in my top 10, the Founding Myth one.
It's really good. I've read probably about half of it so far, and I've listened to even more than that on the audiobook because I always get both, right? So if I can't continue reading it, I can jump in the car and just continue listening, right?
Go on.
Which is awesome.
Agreed.
And the next one I'm going to get physically is Aaron Ra's Falsehoods of Christianity, because I have the audiobook, but I don't have the physical one yet.
Also on my list of many, many, many things. I'm reading a very depressing book right now. I need a happier book. I'm reading the Howard Zinn, People's History of America, I think.
Yeah.
Super informative and super horrifying and wonderful and depressing and just awful. That's a good one. I think we should all read it.
All right. So, what about your family? How does your family feel about your non-religiosity nowadays?
My side of the family knows. My mom knows, and she's okay.
She's okay with it?
My brother and my sister are both atheists.
Okay.
So there was people comforting. Another sister of mine. It's a shame. I don't think I've spoken, and she could be in the chat right now for all I know. If you're in there, Des, I love you. We don't discuss it much. Maybe more a deistic thing.
It's possible.
But the benefit is that I still am comfortable enough to talk to her and them, and I don't feel that I'm not free to. I still feel connected and loved enough by them so that if I were, I wouldn't feel attacked. You know what I mean? So that's something that tons of people don't have. The in-law side does not know. And that is a hard one because they are missionaries. So I have not brought myself to do that yet. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen by accident. My son is going to say something because that's what they do. They just say things.
Blurt shit out.
They just say stuff, and it's going to be like Christmas Day. And then my poor husband, he's just like, I'm just going to leave the room.
You're on your own.
You're on your own if that is to happen. I'm just going to go. And, I can't really blame him. It's a hard conversation.
It's a tough one.
Of course, you want to be able to be free to talk to people about it.
Oh, yeah.
But, I do understand that it's not something that I can expect people to just say, oh, good for you,
Well, if you're dealing with religious people, they're probably going to be more like, well, why?
Not even why. When my brother came to me, I didn't ask him why. I didn't try to listen to him at all. It was more, well, let me convince you, which I did a terrible job. It's embarrassing, actually. If I were to really think about it, I would want to crawl in a hole about how bad that argument was.
Yeah. Well,
whatever. It's over now. I don't have to think about it anymore.
That's right. We've moved past.
The past. It's over. But anyway. So now
we've gone well over the hour. And you were all concerned about us not being able to fill an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, it's been a great chat. Yeah. And she took my advice and decided to get a little liquored up before this, just kind of loosen up a little bit.
Yeah.
So not so bad. Now that we're towards the end, right? It wasn't so bad.
No, it was good. Well, you're a delight, Neil. I wasn't worried about you because you're just fun and sweet and nice. So it was more like my nerves because I'm a totally cool, calm person.
I sense sarcasm in that. Well, now we're going to get into the fun stuff because we're going to do the after party because you were very excited about doing that and meeting some of the other crazy folks. So if any of you guys would like to be involved in this, let me know. Send me a message on Twitter or Facebook if you're not on Twitter. And I will, as long as there's room, I'll give you a link and you can jump in. Remember, though, I can, with Toe and myself, I can only have 4 people. It's
You
unlike
can call
Google
me
Hangouts.
Michelle, Neil. My name is
Michelle,
Michelle.
right.
I can be a real
Right.
person with you guys. I'm allowed.
A real person.
A
Yay.
real person.
Not this made up name stuff.
No.
It's a good one, though. I like
Thanks. It was a super fun dream.
it. Was it?
Yeah, it was
So
weird.
that's why you took it, eh? Because of that? Okay.
Yeah, it was
That's
weird.
awesome.
It's the name of a 911 dispatcher.
Before I go, I forgot to ask you, my friend Don, yet again, had another question for you. This is actually going way back to about 2/3 of the way through our talk. Wanted to know what kind of music you like.
Oh, that's a good question. Lots of music, except country. I don't like country music. I'm sorry if someone loves country music. I don't listen.
That's not my favorite, but there are some. Like I love Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, like the Man in Black.
Because it's Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, and that's perfectly acceptable.
And when he covered 9 Inch Nails' "Hurt," Trent Reznor himself went, he owns that fucking song now.
Very good, right? Yeah, it's so funny. There are some songs, and rarely do you get a cover that you say that's the best version of that. And if there are any Deep Purple fans, I'm so sorry, but there's a cover of Deep Purple's "Hush." It's
by what the hell's their name?
Kula Shaker.
Yeah, Kula Shaker, which is unbelievable.
Oh my goodness, it's fantastic. I prefer it to the Deep Purple's original. Thank you, Deep Purple, for writing it so that they could cover it. But,
there you go. Amazing. Awesome.
It's just fantastic. It is even more fantastic to watch a 2-year-old sing it with his little microphone and copy the whole video. Oh, it's wonderful.
Awesome.
So all good stuff. Rock. Wilco is one of my absolute favorites. Kula Shaker. Yeah. I am very much, if I could help anyone in the world right now, please go listen to Black Pumas. Colors. Oh my goodness, they're fantastic. They're very new.
Yeah, my buddy's band is very new and making a big splash too. They're called The Wild, and they're out of Kelowna here. And they kind of sound like if AC/DC and what the hell's the other band I always used to say? Shit. Anyway, it kind of sound like a Love Child mashup between The Wild, they're called, with an exclamation point. And Roadhouse is the name of the song. Check that out. It's fucking great. I will. I mean, their bass player's name is Boozes instead of Jesus.
Check it out just for the name. That is so interesting. Names are interesting. See?
But yeah, they're local guys. And we got to play with them way back in the day.
What?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Well, of course, I actually was the promoter of the show, so of course I'm slotting my band in there.
You should.
With some very well-known bands. We had The Wild, we had Aviator Shades, and then we had a local punk band that's been around since the mid-'80s called the Dayglow Abortions. So they headlined it. And their drummer is blind. So he'd set up his kit, and then he'd feel around for where everything is, and then he'd just go to town.
That means he has an extra special power of hearing. His hearing is probably 1 billion times better than ours.
Oh yeah. But I got his signature, and he signed it in dots, little braille dots. Nice. It was fucking awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Anyway, let's wrap this up. Let's get into an after party, because these are the kind of things that we can talk about in there. Thank you, everyone, for joining Michelle and myself for this hour and 15-minute long discussion. One of the longer ones, but I always let them go a little longer when I'm having fun, so it's always good.
Sorry, thank you.
That's okay. I do have a link to Michelle's Tau DeMille Twitter below if you want to follow her. I highly recommend that you do. She's very, very smart, and once she starts getting going on some of these discussions that we have with believers, I'm kind of like, okay, I don't need to be here anymore, and I just let her take over. But also, if you guys do take what I do, there are a few ways to help out the show. I have a Patreon now, so you can become a patron. I have actually 3 patrons now, which I always thought was kind of cool. So let's give a big shout out to them. My Patreons are David Worley, Megan Lewis, and Robert X. So yeah, that's always good. And I like to show this one every once in a while too. If you ever need a source to go to look at what we consider to be good peer-reviewed evidence and stuff like this, the Clarivate Master Journal List is the best place to go for that. So there you go. And we will get into an after party probably within about 10 minutes or so, because I usually like to go have my quick pee after drinking a couple of these and the smoke, and then I'll come back in and we'll get going. So yeah, Michelle, just wait for me and I'll send you a brand new link, and we'll jump into that.
Thank you.
Also, I forgot to mention the other ways if you do want to support the show. You can do a one-time donation or whatever on my PayPal me, link to that below, and I also have a Amazon wish list, so you can also grab me something from there. And remember, Christmas is coming, but still summer, so who cares? Anyways, until next time, guys, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed the show as much as we had participating in it. Until the next time, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens once said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. And we'll see you guys next time.